Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it so you don't have to. And welcome to another rendition of Old vs. New. Who would have thought a story about a giant monkey who falls in love with a woman, climbs buildings, and smashes dinosaurs would be considered a classic? Well, King Kong certainly was. When it was released in 1933, it captured the world's interest with its groundbreaking effects and a timeless story about what happens when two threatening natures collide. Since then, there's been several remakes, but they sucked donkeys, and none of them have been considered on par with the original. That is until 2005, when Peter Jackson took his shot at telling the story. This is the only version that people say is not only as good as the original, but possibly better. But can it truly outdo the classic? Is there really enough there to keep it fresh and new while still staying true to the original? Well, let's find out. I never thought I'd be put in a position to say this, but it's monkey versus monkey here on Nostalgia Critic. This is old versus new King Kong. Well, we can't tell this Beauty and the Beast story without our beauty. That is not the beauty, for most of us. I'm talking about our main actress, who happens to play the main actress. This is our best leading lady. Now, both of these films have good, charismatic actresses. Each has to have a charming personality and good looks to match in order to tame the beast. They are certainly different, though. In the original, the character Odero is played by Fay Wray, who is constantly told that she doesn't belong on board.
I wish you wouldn't keep harping on that. It's very mean of you.
Women just can't help being a bother. Made that way, I guess.
Despite that, though, she still keeps an optimistic point of view.
Don't you think the skipper's a sweet old lamb?
I'd hate to have him hear me say that.
In the newer version, she's played by Naomi Watts, who's a little more welcomed on the ship, so she doesn't have to defend herself as much.
What a lovely dress.
Oh, this old thing? I just threw it on.
Both have to play the classic screaming damsel in distress, and in terms of traditional screamers, Fay Wray is probably a little closer. But Watts' portrayal has a little bit more edge to it. In the original, King Kong just sort of likes Darrow. And even though they make her very positive and energetic, all she does around Kong is scream. Granted, we don't want to see anything bad happen to her, but she doesn't do anything that would make Kong really like her. The newer one has to work for her survival. They indicate that Kong has killed dozens of sacrifices in the past, but because of her performance training, she's able to actually entertain Kong. But even she has her limits.
No! I said no! That's all there is.
She's standing up to a 10-story gorilla. That takes balls. Or ovaries, I don't know, but it takes a lot of them. Because of this, the newer version truly does have the better lead. She's just more interesting and takes more chances. The original is good too. You really do like her and don't want to see her in danger, but the screaming just gets a little old after a while. Yeah, scream some more, maybe he'll finally go away. Point goes to the new.
Oh, dear, and I thought everything was going so nicely.
But what about the supporting cast? Do they match up just as well as the lead? Well, here's the little people that literally got stepped on to make it to the top. Let's start with the romantic lead. In the original, he's played by Bruce Cabot, a rough and gruff sailor who doesn't like the idea of women being on board his ship. Now, why would that be? No, that's not it. In fact, he actually ends up falling in love with Darrow, even if it is pretty sporadic.
See, if anything had happened to you...
Well, then you wouldn't be bothered with having a woman on board.
Say, I guess I love you.
I've only known you for 5 minutes, but unless a giant gorilla comes through the trees and steals you away, I think you're the one. And granted, some of the dialogue is a little hokey too. In fact, they even make fun of it in the remake. The lines they shoot for their movie are actually identical to the ones they say in the original. Except in the original, that was supposed to be the real dialogue.
I think this is awfully exciting. I've never been on a ship before.
Well, I've never been on one with a woman before.
I think this is awfully exciting. I've never been on a ship before.
I've never been on one with a woman before.
But for all the stereotypical macho-ness, he actually is pretty likable. Sort of the tough guy with a soft heart sort of thing.
Well, I was a little scared.
I guess you weren't the only one.
In the new one, we get Adrian Brody, who is straight up boring.
That was pure effluence.
I beefed up the banter.
Try to resist that impulse,
I'm sorry, but he is just not interesting. I know they're trying to downplay the hero aspect and make him look like a normal, boring guy, but you can still make him look like an interesting, boring guy. If that makes any sense.
Why would I write a play for you? Isn't it obvious? It's in the subtext.
By God, you're a doll. What about the crazy director that takes him on this voyage? Again, I prefer the original, played by Robert Armstrong. Mostly because if you looked at him, you wouldn't guess that he was an eccentric thrill seeker. He's very professional and sort of keeps to himself, which shrouds his character in a lot more mystery.
But you've got a reputation for recklessness that can't be glossed over. And then you're so secretive.
Good Lord, you talk as if I never brought anybody back alive.
When you see him, you think sort of a mad genius. A guy who can convince you to jump off a cliff if it would make the shot look good.
What do I have to do?
Just trust me and keep your chin up.
He's very smooth, even if he is batshit insane. Jack Black, on the other hand, is a little too obvious. He always has his eyes bugging out and always seems to talk in an intense manner.
No, Carl, you can't do this.
Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure.
It's not ethical.
What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh?
Now granted, a lot of directors do act like that.
カットカットカットカットカットサントリーの響きだよ。高いんだからサントリーの中で一番。もう、インテンシティ。サントリータイム。
But for a voyage this crazy, you have to have the ability to convince people and make them trust you. I don't get that from Black. I don't believe anyone would go with him on a crazy voyage. I don't know, maybe I just can't trust anyone who isn't Biodome. That would taint anybody's liability for me. The rest of the crew in the new version, though, are pretty memorable. I like Andy Serkis's cutthroat cook.
On a castaway, he spoke of a creature. Neither beast nor man.
Yeah, I can hardly wait.
And I thought that Hayes guy was pretty mysterious too. The rest of the crew in the original is pretty forgettable. You know, outside of the obvious racial stereotypes.
Me not see 1 2 hours. Look, sir, me find on deck. Native bracelet. Crazy black man been here.
Speaking of which, that tribe is pretty silly looking nowadays, isn't it? I'm sure it was impressive back then, but now it just looks silly. You'd come across more realistic natives in Gilligan's Island. The ones in the newer version are just fucking crazy, and a lot more intimidating.
Look, chocolate. You like chocolate?
Note to self, chocolate means war. Sort of a toss-up, but I am going to go with the original. Mostly because of the romantic lead and the film director. They're just bigger roles, so they soak up a lot more credit. And in this comparison, that adds up to a lot. Point goes to the old.
What are you, an idiot?
And now we come to the effects.
New version.
Oh, shut up. You don't know it's going to be the new version. I mean, remember, the effects back then with the original were groundbreaking.
New version.
Just take a look. Now I know what you're thinking. How can the effects in the original be anything compared to the new? Well, to be honest, these are still very impressive effects for that time. And not only that, they had to get really creative to make them happen. Obviously King Kong is stop motion, but for the people, sometimes they had to take still pictures and would animate them along with Kong. Other times they would use a green screen. Other times it was forced perspective. Other times they would literally just build a giant Kong. That's a lot of creativity and a lot of hard work. The newer one is mostly computers. I mean, everything is computers nowadays. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of hard work put into it, but it just gets a little tiring seeing CG effects over and over and over. And to be honest, they're not that spectacular. When I think of good CG effects, I think of something that either looks realistic like Gollum or the Headless Horseman, or something stylized like Sin City or Across the Universe. Here, I can always tell it's computers. Sometimes there's models, but it's mostly computers. But, let's be honest, yeah, it does look a lot more realistic. Granted, I never really thought the creatures were there in the new one, but then again, I really never thought they were there in the original. I guess that's not really the idea of either film, though. We're not there to admire the effects are there to help the story. We don't have to believe the characters are really there, we just have to feel what they're going through. And both films do a very good job of that. But it is sort of obvious who the winner is, isn't it? The newer version. Though I still really admire the original for its creativity. And in my opinion, they're still pretty damn impressive. Point goes to the new.
Well, there's a good reason.
And now we come down to the eighth wonder of the world himself. Which one had the better Kong? Which one did you feel more sorry for, and which one had more heart and soul? I don't know, but I don't think either of them can compare to Amy. Nobody was more compassionate and heartfelt than her.
Tickle me.
Ew. Now for me, this is the hardest part because I really like both Kongs. And again, you'd think it's an effects thing, but it's really not. It's just that they're both really well portrayed. They both have a big heart and both fall in love with our main lead, but there are definitely some major differences. In the original, Kong is much more animalistic. The way he moves and the way he acts is much more like an actual ape. Okay, the movements aren't quite as realistic, but the actions are. Look at the scene where he's trying to get this guy. You can see the wheels in his head are turning as he's trying to figure out how to nab him. This Kong also has a very blank expression. You can't always tell when he's happy or sad. Again, much like a real animal. In fact, the way a lot of these creatures move seems very animalistic. Again, it's not totally realistic, but you sense the survival techniques these creatures have. They react like predators who will stop at nothing until they stomp their prey. Because of this, they're a lot more threatening and a lot more unpredictable. The remake is a little different. They actually model Kong after a real actor, Andy Serkis, so you can very easily tell what emotion he's feeling at the time. For no dialogue, they get across a lot with this character, and you really get the idea about what he's going through whenever he's on screen. In a sense, they sort of develop him a little bit more and make him a little bit more humanistic. The only downside is that it's not very animal-like. Not that animals don't feel anything, I know they do, but they're creatures of instinct first. Plus, when you look at an animal, it's very hard to figure out what they're feeling or thinking. That's why so many of them are unpredictable. Because of this, it's the blank expressions of the original Kong that I surprisingly have more emotion for. He just seems much more like a creature that was stolen from his natural environment. I guess it's because we don't know what he's thinking, and he's probably not super smart, that we feel even more sorry for him. Look at that naive, dumbass smile. I feel so sorry for that chimp even before the bad things happened to him. And again, the new one is very good, but it seems a little bit more like a performance than an actual animal. It moves more like an animal, but doesn't act as much as an animal. And even though I feel sorry for him, I feel more sorry for the original. He just seems more helpless to me in some way. And in the end, you're always going to feel more sorry for the more helpless creature. Point goes to the old.
What are you, a Bolshevik or something?
Once again, the big deciding point is story. Which one told the tale of ape meets girl better? This is best story. Both of these films have very similar stories, but the newer one seems to go into a lot more detail. In the original, everything is sort of vague, which I guess is the idea, surrounding everything about the adventure and mystery. In the new one, though, we get a lot more background. We see the deciding point for when the director goes to the island, we see Darrow's job before she tags along with him, and we spend quite a bit of time on the boat before we even get to the giant ape. Too long! I became so fucking sick of this boat and these damn people on it. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to hold themselves to that rule of Jaws where you wait an hour to show the monster, but this is way too fucking long. And half the people on the ship aren't that interesting anyway, so you're just kind of stuck there. I mean, who's gonna entertain me? Adrian Brody? Look, I love being the pianist, but you are boring! The original was much quicker and to the point. There was certainly build-up, but not to the point where it got annoying and tedious. However, in the new one, we do get a better connection between Darrow and Kong. There's actually quite a few silent moments where you really see them make sort of a strange connection together. In the original, it's a bit more primal. It's a little bit more harsh and cold. The newer one seems to have a lot more heart than the original, but even that seems to go a little too far. Like when she visits him in the city. Okay, I know she's trying to tame him and keep him under control, but then they go ice skating! That's just weird! How can I take that seriously? It's Kong on ice! I keep expecting Mickey Mouse to pop up at any moment! Plus, there's just some all-around strange scenes in the new one. Like how about when the director tells the writer exactly where they're going? This is one of the oddest things ever. It's totally over the top for no reason.
It has a local name, but I'm warning you, Jack, it doesn't sound good.
They call it S-A-2-L.
Skull? Skull? You mean like that thing in my head? My God. Skull.
Oh, no.
Skull!
Santa Maria!
Skull! No! No! This can't be a secret any longer! The people must know! Skull! 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 Skull!
It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!
So yeah, there's quite a few over-the-top scenes like that. But to be fair, there's a lot of over-the-top scenes in the original too. But here's the difference. The original was made in the 30s, at a time when this was not considered that corny. This was made just a few years ago, and the corny scenes were corny even then. Like how about that guy who falls in slow-mo where everyone else moves regularly? Why was his fall such a big deal? Was he the director's brother or something? How about some of those quirky, over-the-top performances?
Mr. Driscoll, if you don't mind me saying, but you don't look at all like your photograph. You see, I was just afraid that you might be one of those self-obsessed literary types. You know, the Tweety twerp with his nose in his book and his head up his hat.
Or how about that cutting frames trick that's never been fucking cool? Little stuff like that really adds up in the long run. And even though there's a lot of really good things about the newer version, the original just tells the story better. There's no tricks, no avant-garde or artsy way of showing things, it's just the straightforward story. So when everything is added up, it really does seem like that the original King Kong is the superior film. Point goes to the old, the better movie. So that's my old versus new on King Kong. Stay tuned next week when I review Drop Dead Fred. That's a movie so bad it'll make you flip out of your skull. Ooh, I said skull. I'm a nostalgia critic. I remember it so you don't have to.
It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!
Crazy black man been here.